Welcome, let's see a breach showcase before I go over the build. Pay close attention, it won't last long. Let's review the gems and equipment, before discussing how the build works. We have 3 barrier invocations, so I will start with the most important, which is Comet, because of its high base damage and mana cost. This skill is combined with Capacitor, to increase maximum energy to 900, allowing us to hold 3 charges, because Comet requires 300 energy. We must also use Impetus, because our energy generation is low, and we want to release 3 charges as often as we can. Spell Echo doubles Comet's damage, by repeating again each time, and lastly is Concentrated Effect, for more damage. We are unable to generate enough energy for Comet, so we must feed it energy from another invocation. Cold Snap has a reasonably high cost and low cast time, making it ideal to charge our Comet for us, and deal damage. We combine both of these spells with a Scattershot and Cascade support gem, as well as another Comet, which I will explain later. Lastly, in our third invocation, is Eye of Winter, which is used to apply debuffs for us, and also helps a lot with clearing. Withering Touch and Cold Exposure are both very powerful supports which greatly enhance our damage. We also combine these with Acceleration and Ricochet, for faster debuffing and clearing. Other supporting gems we use are Alchemist Boon with Herbalism. A level 9 Despair is used, because we already have more than 75% cold penetration, we increase the extra added damage from our Ming's Heart. Ball Lightning and Lightning Warp are used to travel over obstacles, as well as to stack Shocked Ground, before a boss spawns. Our flask has very high increased recovery, and reduced charges used. We use Enfolding Dawn, because it lowers our Infernal Flame, and makes it easier to fill. Ming's Heart Rings are used in both slots, to reduce the damage we take, and grant us extra damage as Chaos. Malagaro's virtuosity, it may as well say plus 200% increased critical damage bonus, because that's what it does for us. On the belt, it is important to have reduced charges used and increased flask recovery, as well as being a fine belt itself. The helmet and boots should be where we stack as much resistance as possible. It does not matter about other stats like mana, life, or energy shield, although some attributes should be gotten somewhere. The amulet is a lot more helpful if it offers us additional spell skill levels. Damage recouped as life and resistances are good too. You may need some additional spirit, if you do not get enough from our ascendancy. We also anoint Heavy Drinker, to grant us longer flask duration. The skill tree has undergone some reforms, and is now very high investment. Do not try to copy this build as your starter, we have a separate video for your League Start build. I have explained the mechanics of these ascendancies, in depth, in another video, which I will link below. All we need to know is that we cannot take Grinning Immolation, because of our gloves, and the extra spirit makes it possible to afford a good amulet. At the start of the tree, we get a lot of extra energy shield, and can even reduce our mana. It's very important we take this node particularly, because we want as little flame as we can get. Because we have reduced our energy shield, sometimes when casting, we damage our life, so this is an extra layer of defense, against ourselves, but also other enemies, especially against any dots. Soul Bloom is the obvious choice, whether with skill points, or a megalomaniac, it is too strong to pass. Interestingly, it is not Comet that we have a Prism of Belief for, but Cold Snap. This is to increase the mana cost, and generate more energy, for our Comet, and other invocations. If Frostbolt is also used, like in this version, Cold Snap contributes a significant portion of damage. This cluster of nodes is a gold mine for our build, having 6 notable passives in range, for Against the Darkness, grants us 6% maximum fire resistance, for only 11 skill points, plus the socket. The nodes themselves are actually very strong for this build, but will still likely be replicated, in all triple barrier invocation setups, from now on. Here we place our Megalomaniac, granting us Hard to Kill, which is the strongest passive we can get, so make sure it is on your amulet, or on the Megalomaniac. Pliable Flesh is used to increase our recuperation, which is very helpful as an extra layer of defense. The rest of the tree is heavily invested into our flask. But we also spend 2 points, to get 21% cold penetration. On our ruby jewels, we must get maximum fire resistance, and use them to get to our stat requirements, because our gear options are very restricted. Again, we take as many flask options, as are efficiently possible, and keep stacking the fire resistance, with attributes, on our jewels. Oasis is notable, and does provide us with more recovery, which is a huge boost to our flask. Lastly on the tree, we get more flask nodes, but we do have 1 emerald this time, with extra flask duration, being the reason for choosing this, but more recovery does help. We also use this jewel to cap our resistance, because it's hard with the gear slots we have available. First, we must generate energy, but because we lowered our shield, we must use low-level abilities, to deal as little damage as possible. Once damage is taken, use a life flask, and then spam your curse for a few seconds, to build up energy. Comet is our main damage. We keep that invocation pressed, always. Eye of Winter is used to generate energy, for Comet, which means, we need a way to generate energy for Eye of Winter, because Comet will not sustain it, with our low energy gain. So this is where we use Frostbolt and Cold Snap, to generate extra energy for Eye of Winter, which fuels Comet and deals damage. Because of Cold Snap's high base damage, low cast time, and unique interaction with Frostbolt, we can take great advantage of this skill. Frostbolt is used as a level 3 gem, because the extra flame it would generate is too much for this loop to handle. So we have our curse, fueling all our invocations, and to keep the loop going, because Comet requires a lot of energy, we include additional spells to charge all invocations at once, due to the mana costs dealing damage to us. And each invocation is checking for damage independent from each other, so the energy applies to each one. The last thing I would like to share, before showing the Delirious map run, with shocked ground is shock-proofing. So we see our character at 90% fire resistance, and to simulate the shock effect, we remove 2% fire resistance, because we already negate 90%, leaving only 10%. Now if we remove 2%, that is an extra 20% more damage we will take. Let's begin our loop, and see if we can sustain it. This looks quite dangerous, but we are still recovering more than the damage we take. As you can see, the build does not need 90% fire resistance, but it is better for reasons such as not wanting to die to any old lightning damage that thinks it can shock us. We should make ourselves shock-proof. Seriously, I cannot emphasize enough how important this is for smooth playing and quality of life. We have still not died, and this is due to our impressive recovery stats. Our flask recovery is almost 11,000, and our damage recoup ramps up to about 5,000, which is a very large amount of recovery, considering how much we have reduced our life and shield. The damage we take is based on our total maximum life and energy shield. Because we have lowered them, we take very little damage each hit, and recoup less than normal. Well, that's it for the Comet BBI build. There will be more builds to come, so you can choose which skills you actually like to play, and I'll create those videos with more gameplay footage and path of building guides. I thought it would be fitting to remind us of something about the game's intentions, and what it expects from us as players or theory crafters. With this in mind, I think it's fair to say, we have paid our due. Please enjoy this delirious map with shocked ground, and a boss at the end. I thank you for watching, and wish you well.